welcome to the Generation Hustle Podcast, the show that explores the world of business, entrepreneurship, and culture, all centered around the millennial. I'm your co-host Amin, alongside my good friend Sherston. On episode 19, we sit down with Canadian hockey legend Hayley Wickenheiser and her business partner, Dr. Jeff Shaw. Since the start of COVID-19, there has been an increased awareness around contact tracing and safety measures in the workplace. Realizing many businesses were struggling to adapt, both Dr. Shaw and Hayley's team at Pandemic Solutions created a platform that provides a return-to-work product for businesses seeking a better way to operate in pandemic conditions. We explore some of the sciences around how viruses spread, how vaccines are created, and also a discussion around how their platform helps businesses. Since both Hayley and Dr. Shaw have been on the front lines, we also want to give a special shout out to all frontline workers who have done so much during this pandemic. Thank you for your service. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Thank you so much again. And let's get started here. So obviously we wanted to get into the pandemic solution and understand what you guys are doing. But before that, we just wanted to understand some of the science behind it.
Sure.
So Dr. Shaw, if you can kind of walk us through, obviously this is what's going on everyone's minds right now with viral transmissions. So we wanted to understand kind of the science behind how viruses are spread and how exactly they impact your body, just to understand the science behind that, because I feel like we get a lot of headlines, but people don't really understand the ins and outs of it.
That's true. Well, when you're talking about viruses in general, they can spread in a number of different ways: sexual contact through the air. You're talking about COVID-19 in particular. It has the main way it's spread is just through sharing air. So if I'm in the room with someone who has it and we're breathing the same air, over time, they're going to release particles of the virus into the environment and spend enough time together. I'm going to breathe some of those into my nose, my mouth, into my lungs. And that's the main way it's transmitted.
Right.
If that person's coughing or sneezing, more particles go out, so that's worse. If there's no ventilation, there's nothing taking those particles out of the room, that's worse. If we're inside versus outside, there's going to be a higher density of particles. So that's why the highest risk event is me sitting next to someone in the early part of the disease who's symptomatic. So that's the main way it's transmitted. There are other ways. It is also transmitted through contact. It just less events occur that way, less transmission. Right. So if you have it, touch a door handle, I go touch that door handle, rub my eyes. That's an entry point where I could have gotten virus on my hand, and then it can enter my body through my eyes, my nose, my mouth if I'm rubbing something like that. So that's why the general guidance of hand washing and then the separate guidance of masking it. At the beginning, I think we thought it was more that later one where it was more, touching a door handle, where over time people have come to understand it's actually more the sharing the air, less that one, but both are in play.
For sure. So going off of that, obviously the question that everyone wants to know is understanding how we can counteract this. We would love to have a vaccine, but we want to understand the mechanics behind that, because we're hearing different things around, it might take 2 years, it may take 1 year, depending on who you ask. So can you walk us through a bit of why the vaccine could take as long as 2 years and kind of what goes into that?
Sure, I'll do my best in this regard. I'm an ICU doctor. I don't know the ins and outs of every of the major vaccine trials. There's 13 trials right now that are in phase 3. Phase 3 is the final trial for a new medication, and it usually involves a large-scale trial where you're testing it in thousands of people, in particular with vaccines. So what they have to do is they have to give people the vaccine versus giving another group of people a fake vaccine, like a placebo, and then wait until enough people have gotten it that they could tell if there's a difference. And so you just have to wait. The higher the amount of virus spreading in a population, the less time you'll have to wait, because the more people will get it. Right. So in that process, I think we're getting close to some of these major companies actually having some meaningful results in phase 3 trials. I think that we'll start hearing things of these 13 major trials by the end of this year, probably in the next several months. But that does not mean that the vaccine's then just ready to be, injected into your arm. The results of that trial might be that it doesn't work. Right. So, and some of these trials are testing really novel things. RNA viruses. We don't have RNA viruses that are used on a large scale in populations yet. So the novel mechanisms make you wonder, it's possible that it works, it's possible that it doesn't. there are some standard mechanisms being tested as well. And then once you get the result that says it works, then you have to go through an approval process that it's safe, and then a production process and a distribution process. Typically, those things take a long time, but obviously they're going to be accelerated because of the scale of this problem. How much they can be accelerated is pretty difficult to know. I imagine that process could be, taken from a year or two down to months. I think that's realistic to expect that process would be accelerated greatly, but it's very hard to know in particular.
For sure. Yeah, it's good to know. Sorry, Amin, you were going to say something.
No, I think with the emerging issue of COVID-19, you guys have obviously created a platform around this whole scenario. And we know a lot of businesses have to now adapt. And so that's kind of what's made your team kind of build up Pandemic Solutions, the whole platform. So Hayley, can you walk us through first what the solution kind of caters to and how the team actually came together with the idea for Pandemic Solutions?
Yeah, for sure, Amon. So, this has been a wild and crazy time, as everybody knows, with the pandemic going on. And the lens that I was sitting from was I was working with the Leafs and I was working in emergency rooms across the GTA. And over a 24-hour period, all of that stopped. And so life as I knew it was over. Life as Jeff knew it was entering next level craziness because he was starting to treat patients in the ICU with COVID. And so I recall one night working in the emergency where a gentleman came in and he thought he was having a panic attack because he was worried about losing his business, but it turned out he was actually having a heart attack. Wow. I think it was Jeff that reached out to me and said, man, I'm worried, yes, about people's health and safety, but I'm worried about the economy. How are we going to keep Canada going? And so it was just like a few of us friends that started talking about this, and Pandemic Solutions was born. And so what Pandemic Solutions is it's essentially a track and trace system, a symptom screening system, and an ability to cohort, which means putting people in work bubbles, to allow businesses to open safely and to mitigate. It doesn't obviously prevent the transmission of COVID-19, but to mitigate the chances that someone's going to test positive. And if they did in the workplace, a way to quickly track back where that came from, to quickly knock out maybe one section of your business that's been cohorted and working together and keep the rest of your business going. So, for example, in the gym situation here in Ontario, a lot of gyms are closing. There was that gym outbreak, I think, in London. And I think one of the things that they weren't doing was cohorting, was putting people into bubbles. And so when one person got it, effectively spread everywhere because they weren't really containing by time, by space, or by distance. So that's essentially what it is. Jeff, do you want to add anything to that as to what we've done? And
no, I think what we're trying to do is take simple concepts that are sometimes very hard to implement and make it easier to implement. So we know that some of the most effective ways to get through this is to trace where it's coming and where it's going, and to distance. Distancing obviously works. It's common sense. If I'm not around someone who has it, I'm not getting it. But when you're running an organization and you're trying to have people work functionally together, it's hard to distance everyone. So what we're trying to do is create a system in which you can create subgroups of people that aren't distanced within an organization, but keep those groups distanced from each other. Run the same rules of wearing a mask and everything else that helps prevent the spread, but then use that subgrouping and implementation of that subgrouping to help prevent it from spreading around, and then track it. We do daily symptom screens through our system, and so you can see when someone is symptomatic, when someone tests positive in your organization, and then try to turn on that real quick so that it doesn't spread.
Yeah. And so, Hayley, you also mentioned this concept of cohorts. So why is that specifically more effective than, say, other solutions or ways of, effectively not spreading the virus?
Yeah, so let's take an example. So we've implemented this into factories with Bombardier. So some of their factories. Okay, so if you can imagine, people work shift work. Now, this doesn't just apply to shift work, but let's just use shift work as an example. So let's say people start at 8 o'clock in the morning and there's 25 people on the line working. Those people could effectively be a cohort. A cohort could be one person, two person, 200 people. But what that allows the system to do is say those 25 people work from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. someone tests positive in that cohort, then effectively you can actually knock out those people. They go home and self-isolate, but the factory can keep running. So it allows the ability to group people into chunks. We're doing it also on another television production here in Toronto with on a TV production set, where they're having people come in different sort of pods and be able to clump people together that way. And it's just a way to really allow your business to keep going if something happens. I mean, that's the essence of it, very simply.
No, I almost like kind of related back to my career in accounting, where we call it segregation of duties. But in terms of what you guys are doing, you're kind of segregating kind of bodies and, groups. So in order to keep individuals safe. So keeping in line with that, obviously we have businesses of all different sizes. So how does your solution kind of cater to the various, we have mom and pop shops, and then also the enterprise clients such as Bombardier that you've mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so I mean, I can just quickly, we have Bombardier, which, thousands of employees. We've got Marble Slab Ice Cream, so that's just like their head office and some ice cream shops, so some storefronts. We've got mortgage companies. We've got other auto dealerships. If I'm forgetting anybody, Jeff, but TV production studios. So small and large business alike. It doesn't really matter because this is a very scalable system in terms of the numbers of employees that you're using, and the software could be as simple as an email sent to people and they just sort of check a box before they come into work, or a kiosk when they enter, let's say they enter the storefront and they fill it out right there. I think Jeff is looking at doing it in the ICU in which he works, the cardiology department that he works in the hospital. So it's a very nimble and adaptive system that we have, and I think we're just pretty excited about it because we feel like not only, yes, it's a business, but we feel like we're doing something good for Canada, or really good. It feels good to do good at times and feel like we actually believe in what we're doing and the science that's behind this.
And I think different organizations use it in slightly different ways, and the concepts overlap. So if you're a customer-facing business with lots of visitors or customers coming in, you might want to know who arrived there on what day, so that you can ensure you're doing a bit of a job of tracking and tracing. Some provinces just require it, like in Ontario, they require, before restaurants shut down, the restaurants to be doing that. And so our system allows you to do that. You might still separate out your the employees into smaller groups, where if you're a internally facing organization like a factory where you're making things, then you really want to prevent and mitigate it kind of breaking out within a factory floor. And so you're going to create smaller groups within that larger space and make sure they're separated in either time or space, and have rules in place where they don't overlap or interact with each other to prevent, a larger outbreak or a larger shutdown event. And so depending on the type of organization, you may use it differently, but the tools there overlap. And we know that you can separate 1,000 people into two groups of 500, and that actually reduces the risk of an outbreak significantly. Or you could separate 5 people into a group of 2 and a group of 3, or 5, just have 2 of 2 and 1, and that also really works. And so it doesn't really matter the size of your organization. The concept holds, which is just the less people who are interacting with each other, or the less people who overlap with each other, the less likely it is to spread.
Right. Just using fundamental medical science in terms of applying that to your solution. So again, it's always amazing to see Canadians building out great solutions. So kudos to you guys there. Dr. Shah, in terms of looking at the post-COVID world, do you kind of believe that contact tracing is kind of here to stay, and almost like something that is going to be almost mandatory per se moving forward?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of imagine that the most likely scenario is that we'll get to a spot where the pandemic becomes endemic at some point, either through vaccination being successful, or just enough people in certain regions getting it. If we don't get a successful vaccine, that I imagine we're still going to live with it. I would love to live in a world where we don't as well. Don't get me wrong. I'm as much hassled by it as anyone else, and I really don't want to see the effects of it on people like we're seeing. I just don't have a lot of confidence that we're going to see the other side of this, anytime soon. And maybe it's just something like the flu that we end up living with in a different way. And so in that sense, because of its effect on people, particularly elder people and people with multiple conditions, I think we're going to still be mindful of it going forward for some time. And I really don't know what the horizon of that timeline is, but I don't think that it's short.
Yeah. Hayley, any thoughts on that as well?
Well, I come at this from a little different because I'm a rookie in medicine. And so I don't know a life in medicine at the moment without a pandemic.
Right.
And so, for example, just starting in my final year of medicine into clerkship, it's called, we wear a mask now every day, all day. Whereas Jeff, for most of his career up until this year, would rarely wear a mask unless he's doing procedures, of course, infectious disease. So I believe moving forward, I will probably potentially wear a mask every day for the rest of my career. I mean, I can see that maybe being a possibility. I'm not sure what Jeff thinks, but I think the way we practice medicine, the way that we interact in business, how many hours we can save by maybe virtual meeting, telemedicine moving forward. In the family med clinic where I am, a lot of people can be dealt with on the phone, but I still think that never replaces the human interaction that we will need. But I think the way in which our world operates is forever changed coming out of this pandemic, for good, bad, and otherwise. And it's just something we're going to have to adapt to.
Right. No, that makes total sense. And then in terms of pandemic solutions as like the platform itself, what are your kind of end goals with it? And the other question I always wonder is, like, you guys are medical professionals. Obviously, you're very busy. So how are you kind of handling the whole startup scaling and making a business while also being medical professionals on the front line?
Well, I won't lie, it's a hustle, right? You got to have passion for it. A startup comes with its bumps and bruises. It can't not. And so you have to have a certain amount of resiliency to get through it. And I think that's the common element the founders to this organization brought, is just thick skin. Mm-hmm. Hayley's a perfect example of that. You know, there's no way you get to where she got to without being able to take a few and move on, right? And so I think that despite the commitments otherwise, we all have a big passion for this. You know, and I think that really is what is the glue that holds us together. We also, you know, have people who are not committed to other things within the organization that are our glue pieces to keep it all together. And so that's important as well. But yeah, I think it's mostly just staying resilient and taking the hits and keep moving. And so that's really what it takes in a startup, right?
Right.
You've probably been through it before too. Is you have your ups and downs and you keep going and you don't let it get you down. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
You guys are called Hustle Pod for a reason. That's
yeah. This is a passion of ours too. So we're hustling kind of every day. You know, it's a side hustle of ours right now. Hopefully we make it into something bigger than that, obviously.
Yeah, no, you know what I think, like as Jeff said, it comes down to resiliency, and it comes down to like stick-to-itiveness. Like I think for a few weeks we were sort of like, oh, is this going to be a thing? Like, do people even believe in doing this? And now, you know, over the last week or so, we're starting to get some seriously good traction with some major players, and it kind of makes it all worthwhile when you get that, you know, as you guys know, when you get that one hit or that one that one sale that kind of keeps you moving forward. But in the end, I think all of us feel that if we were to fail tomorrow, it was well worth it, because we truly believe in what we're doing, and we think that it can help millions of people around the world. So it's an easy thing to be a part of. You're not selling cigarettes or
I think that's the major thing, is like you believe it could help people, like, and it could actually make a difference, right? So having something to sell that you really think is worth it, and that you're not just in it for yourself, but you think that there's a real utility to it, gives you that extra drive to come home and put the kids to bed and start working on it again. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot that goes into that. And Dr. Chow, you mentioned as well, Hayley was built for this. So I like that you mentioned that, because that's where I kind of wanted to go and kind of talk to the pivot that you guys made. So Hayley, if you can kind of speak to the career transition and what kind of brought you to the medical field. Obviously, we know you as the Canadian hockey icon, but nobody knows, or you've mentioned a couple of times now about you're in your final year of med school. So can you talk to us about that transition?
Oh my goodness. Well, it was a big one, but my whole life I wanted to go into medicine since I was about 10 years old. So all of my teammates would not be surprised that I went into med school, because I talked about it nonstop through my career. But I also spent probably as much time hanging out with the doctors and trainers over the years as I did in the dressing room. So it's just always a real interest of mine. My dad was a science teacher. Science was something I liked. So when I got into medicine after the Sochi Olympics, decided to retire. And it's amazing, the parallels. And I know that Jeff didn't play on the Olympic team, but here's a guy who this is his third, what do you call it? Residency specialist? What do you call it, Jeff?
I finished the third specialty. I did internal medicine and cardio, then ICU. Yeah. So
Wow.
Yeah, so that's like basically crazy, because I'm just trying to become an MD, and this guy's like now a triple MD. So the stick-to-itiveness that you need to go through medicine just to survive. I mean, countless nights I'd be in Jeff's kitchen. He'd be teaching myself and his wife Marta, who's in my med school class, about the silliest things he probably thought, but it was all new for us. And so you learn fast, you get thrown into the pressure. But what I feel is that medicine is like hockey.
Right.
You're a team game. You have to make decisions quickly, which is why I like emergency medicine. There's a lot of pressure, but it's just different. Like I can say that I won't feel the pressure that I felt trying to win a gold medal for Canada. Nothing will ever compare to that for me personally. But when you have someone's life in your hands, that is a pressure of a completely different sort. So they're different that way. But it's just the ability to make decisions and also to take criticism. Medicine is ruthless at times, and people can be nasty. They can really be hard on other people. And I feel like I got told every day when I played hockey, I wasn't good at something. We all do as athletes, and that's the life of a pro athlete. And so when people tell me things in medicine, I think maybe other students, younger students, aren't as resilient because they're not used to that, where I kind of laugh and I'm like, I've heard every day my whole life I suck at something. So,
Exactly.
So you just roll with it. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, for sure.
I suck a lot, so it's okay.
Hey, it's good to have that helping hand, right? So, but yeah, and like to that point, like we don't get that insight into an ER situation or anything like that. So this is a question to both of you guys. Is there how was that experience, like especially working in the pandemic, but also in that ER situation? Has your backgrounds helped prepare each other at all through this training process? Like your hockey background helped Jeff, or does Jeff kind of talk you through? Like, how does that kind of work for you guys?
I've schooled Jeff on the ice several times.
we did. Yeah, we do like some pickup hockey here and there. Huh? Yeah. I'm not going to say that that's not true, that Hayley didn't school me. She did.
You know what that reminds me of is that commercial, Hayley, you had, I swear it was, I don't know when it was, but it was you playing with like two guys and you school them on the ice.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah. That's, I don't know, Jeff, if that's what's happening, but
No, I'll admit something though, and this did happen, right? Like you go through some tough weeks in the ICU sometimes, and it's variable. But like there's a few times when I was in the neurotrauma unit, for instance, where you go through a week and there's just, it's devastating. You see, people with young families who are just taken out by random acts of trauma, a car accident, a mountain bike accident on the and it's really, it can be emotionally overwhelming. And I have to say that having Hayley as a friend, and I think that her experience and just life experience and being through everything, I did rely on her to pick me up a few times over the last few years. And so I think it is true. I think that you do have to use each other in order to get through things when you're at your worst. So I will admit to relying on her to kind of lift the spirits sometimes. Yeah.
I rely on him more, though. That's actually the truth. But the interesting thing about medicine, though, is that I don't think you can become a good doctor without good mentors and leadership. And it's the same in business. So like, as we kind of like hack our way through with pandemic solutions, I've had, and Jeff has had, like, we've had some amazing discussions with, Stephen Harper, and we've had discussions with like Arlene Dickinson, and we've gotten through the door to some very serious folks, influential folks. Dina Hinshaw, our medical officer of health in Alberta. So it's been interesting to see people like really believe in us and mentor us along the way, which is no different than in medicine, because you can only learn so much from a book, and then you need people to show you the way.
Right. Sure.
So the thing I took from my hockey career is that I promise myself now in medicine that if I ever become good as a doctor that I will continue to pay it forward, because I see how important it is to help the next generation. And I took that a little bit for granted maybe later in my career in hockey, because you're around and you're just like, oh, rookie, I'm tired. I want to do this right now.
Yeah.
But it's important to keep kind of paying it forward that way, I think, too.
For sure. And I guess now you're the rookie, right? So it's you're switching roles, so that's okay.
I am the rookie.
Hey, that's great. We appreciate that, and obviously that's a testament to what your company is doing to be able to have those connections and see the impact that you're doing. So we're excited to see where Pandemic Solutions goes, and we're looking forward to that. That kind of wraps up the serious portion of our podcast, and I know you have a couple minutes here, so we just wanted to do a quick lightning round. So we're just going to toss a few questions at you really fast, and you're going to answer with the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Me to go first, then Jeff, or something like that, like back and forth?
Yeah, that should be fine. So we'll go Hayley, Jeff.
Okay.
All right. So first off, can you give us your favorite book of all time?
Oh my gosh. I don't even read books anymore.
Oh yeah.
So they're just textbooks.
I got one. My favorite book was called The Idiot. Now I went through school. I was in philosophy, and so Dostoevsky wrote the book. And I have to say, I really related to the main and aptly named character. So.
All right.
I'll say Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl.
Man's Search for Meaning. All right. Awesome. I got to check out this Idiot book. So if there was one person who you could have dinner with, who would that be? A dream dinner guest?
Nelson Mandela.
I like it.
Wow, nice.
I think I'd go for the prior leaders to our current ones in North America. I'd love to sit down with Harper and Obama at the dinner table.
That'd be interesting.
We've gotten Obama so many times on this podcast. It's amazing to see how much of an impact that man has.
Yeah.
For sure. And last but not least, the most important question on our podcast: do you guys like pineapple on your pizza?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I love it. Amin does not.
I do not. I'm not a fan.
Neither my wife, but it's a constant battle. But throw on more pineapple. Yeah.
We love it. It'll keep you warm in the snow. It's okay. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. This was amazing. We appreciate you taking the time to come on our podcast, and we appreciate everything that you're doing, Pandemic Solutions. This was really fun.
Yeah, thanks, guys, and good luck with the podcast.